Hello, Ground Passers, and welcome to another episode of Ground Pass. It is time. I know I have actually gotten requests for this, and that's how I know this is a favorite episode of our listeners, but it is a Grand Slam, so it is time to talk about the threads of the Grand Slam. And this is going to be a special one. It is going to be in two parts. I am joined by the lovely Jessica Schiffer, and this is going to be a long one, guys. I suggest grabbing a cup of tea, but you know what I say, grab a cup of coffee. You know what I mean? Grab a beverage of your choice, and we're going to dive deep into the fashion of the US Open because there is a lot to talk about on and off the court. We're going to be talking about how fashion has just become part of tennis. I think what is this? This is almost our fifth episode of talking about Grand Slam and fashion, and each episode just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So we're going to go deep into that. Of course, we're going to go through our normal episode with Ian Mondial of 40 Love Tennis, where we go through all of the brands and we talk about who's a miss and who's a hit. So settle in, get ready, and here we go. Let's start with Jessica Schiffer. She is new to the show, and I hope you become a regular, Jessica. I hope you become a regular addition. It's just become so much a part of tennis. Tennis has always been in the sort of style and culture world anyway, but it's become more and more intertwined. But before we just dive in and just start talking, because I really haven't introduced you. I'm just like, Jessica, like people know who you are. Jessica, who are you?
I wish people knew me on a first name basis. But no, I have been a fashion and beauty journalist actually for about 14 years. And a few months ago, I founded Hardcourt, which is a weekly tennis newsletter that explores the business, culture, and style of the sport. My work has appeared in Business of Fashion, Vogue Business, and the New York Times Style section. But these days, it's really tennis fashion that I've been covering the most.
Awesome. And you know how we do it, guys. If you're listening to this, I do strongly suggest that you stop, not completely, but you go to our YouTube if you don't have Spotify. So if you have Spotify, there is a video version of this podcast on Spotify. But if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or any podcast platform that doesn't have a video version, go to YouTube. You can watch this there because they're going to be slideshows, a video aid, so you can see what we are talking about. So I'm going to start our little slideshow here so you can take a look at what we are talking about and you can get to know Jessica as well. So let's start here with Hardcourt. So I want to start a little bit with, you've kind of discussed a little bit what Hardcourt is, but what is it really?
Yeah, I think I'm still figuring that out a bit as I go, but I really just wanted to create a place where we could talk about sort of like the off-court stories of tennis, some of which includes fashion and brand partnerships, but then also just like the personal stories, the mental health struggles that we see a lot of players going through, the personality quirks, the drama. I just feel like there's so much to tennis that doesn't really get discussed in depth. And so that's really what I'm focused on going deep on. But obviously with my background in fashion, that's an area where I have a lot of expertise. So that is a heavy component of it. So I do find myself coming back to that week after week. And as you've mentioned, it's become such a part of the sport. So there's really always something new to cover on that front. It just kind of feels like an endless well of content at this point.
Yeah, and I love that you actually touched on that a little bit with also hitting on the personalities of these players and what they're going through as well, because I think this US Open, out of all the other Grand Slams this year, the fashion has kind of melded with the personalities of these players. Like, I think the personalities of the players came out so much in the fashions that they were wearing on court.
Totally. I think we're seeing that more and more, and it's really exciting because for a while, I feel like we haven't gotten to see that on certain
Yeah.
players, depending on like who their kit sponsors are. As I've talked about a lot in hardcourt, I have sort of beef with Nike. I feel like they have not been doing anything very exciting for some of the best players in the world, and we're not seeing enough like differentiation between, you know, the Yannicks and the Carloses of the world. But on the other hand, we're seeing so many brands really start to invest in that and make a point, like New Balance with Coco Gauff, and her collaboration with Miu Miu, I think has just been so special and really reflected like the youthful energy that we get from Coco. And then obviously, I know we'll dive into this a bit later, but the looks that we saw on Venus Williams at this Open have just been incredible. I mean, she's wearing
Yeah.
a new designer every time she steps on court, and these are designers that you don't usually see on the tennis court. So I find that really exciting, and also just kind of like a reflection of her star power.
Yeah, totally. So let's dive in, because I think what hardcourt has really helped me with is keeping up with everything. And, you know, there's just so much you can miss with the fashion and what's going on. And a lot of times, the first time I've seen something break has been following you on hardcourt. So thank you. Thank you.
Love that.
And some of it has been kind of first with the Vuori and, you know, Jack Draper switch for sure, where, you know, you were where the one of the first places where I saw it. And you kind of touched on it there with what Nike has been doing. And I don't know what your take is with this law, because I see it personally as a loss in the sense that Nike has lost this star in Jack Draper. But
Yes,
I think there is also another side where it's kind of like Jack Draper didn't want to be sort of third, fourth fiddle to the
totally.
two top stars that they have.
Yeah, I agree with both of those points. And I think he's kind of said as much in press conferences. I
Mm,
think there's multiple reasons for the switch up. I think the first is that Nike has sort of like de-invested in tennis over the last few years. They really only care about like the top 1 to 2 players in the world. And everyone else just sort of gets the same matchy kits that are boring and not creative.
yeah.
So I think for a star in the making like Jack Draper, that's just not very appealing. You know, he's trying to build his personal brand. How do you do that when you're, you know, across the net from Holger Rune and he's wearing the same kit? Like that isn't really good for brand building. So I think that's the first part. And then I think the second part is money. Obviously, that's always a
Yeah.
factor in these discussions. From what I have heard, Jack made like almost $8 million from this deal, which is, I
Whoa.
think, equivalent to his total prize money.
Wow.
Huge deal. And I'm sure he wasn't making that from Nike. I don't have the
Of course
specifics,
not.
but I would be
Yeah.
very surprised since he's not like, you know, their star tennis player. So I think that's a factor. And then I think creativity does matter to these players. I think a lot of people think it's all about money. I don't think that's all it is. I do think that Jack obviously cares about fashion. He's also just got a beautiful face that is a great fit for fashion and brand partnerships. And I think he just wanted to do something, you know, more unique to him,
Yeah.
and something that worked well with his physique and his style and his swagger. And I think what we've seen from Vuori so far definitely is a better fit than what we saw with Nike.
Yeah, totally. He can kind of like stand out from the crowd a little bit because he was just one of the others
Exactly.
in that respect. And this is all, you know, next to it is something that I've kind of been seeing a lot. Obviously, we've been seeing this sort of like WAG integration of, um, and if you don't know what WAG means, guys, WAG is wife and girlfriend of athletes. And we've seen the sort of rise of the WAG, especially in the tennis space. It's been huge in sort of soccer and football and other sports, but in tennis, it's definitely growing. And we know head WAG in charge, I think, is Morgan Riddle, who is girlfriend of Taylor Fritz, but Paige Lorenz, who's girlfriend or fiance now, yes, fiance of Tommy Paul, is also there. They're now being kind of marketed with their significant other, which Here Paige Lorenz is with Tommy Paul in this New Balance ad campaign. I've seen Morgan Riddle in an ad campaign with Taylor Fritz for Boss. This seems to be like a growing thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a growing trend. I do think it's good for the sport at the end of the day. I know a lot of people hate it and hate the wags, and I understand where they're coming from on some level, but I do think that the more eyeballs that we can bring in, the better. And I think that that's what a lot of these women are achieving. And I think that they get a lot of unfair critique for being involved in
Mm,
the sport, but I do think, they're more than just pretty faces. Another one would be like Ian Broomfield, who's dating Francis Tiafo, and
yeah.
she recently, I think it was just this week, had a suite at the US Open that was sponsored by Lululemon, who is Foe's sponsor. So we are seeing like a lot of overlap between the athlete sponsors and working with their girlfriends and fiancés. And I think that that's really cool. But yeah, this campaign was definitely the most, I guess, like extreme example of that so far, where
Yeah.
we're seeing them both in a campaign together. And it's not just like an Instagram campaign, but it's one that is running on billboards and in magazines and things like that. And I think it just speaks to the power of these wags, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally understand what you mean. Where I think what the sort of critique they're getting is very unfair because they are bringing a lot of eyeballs that would not think about watching tennis
Totally.
before.
Yeah.
And here they are watching tennis, coming to tennis tournaments because it's a thing. And I think this is something people should realize that tennis isn't just it is a sport. It is a sport that you follow throughout the year, and there are tournaments and it's prizes and trophies and all of that, but it's also a social event. It's entertainment, and people come to these things as cultural events, and you go to Wimbledon so that you can wear your dress and your hat and take your photos, and there is that side to the sport too. It's kind of equivalent to, I think, when people go to polo. you know
Mm-hmm.
Polo is a
Yeah.
sport, but a lot of times people are just going to polo to say they went to polo. you know
Yes.
they
To
don't, it's
see
not
and
like they're
be seen.
exactly. So I think they have done a lot for the sport and the visibility of the sport as well. This one was a shocker. I
Well, this is
remember
a
when it
good segue because I actually
yes,
think if you're talking about the Burberry thing with Tommy Paul,
yes,
I think a lot of this has to do with Paige Lorenz. She has worked with the brand for
yeah.
a while now, at least a year. I've seen her wearing their clothes and them dressing her. There's
Hmm.
no doubt in my mind that Lorenz helped make this partnership come to be because otherwise it makes zero sense.
Yep.
Tommy, you're a beautiful man, but you are an all-American man. You
Yes.
don't make sense for Burberry. So I don't get it. Like, happy for you, but I think you would be better suited for an American brand. I will say though, most American fashion brands today just are dropping the ball. They're not cool. So
Yeah.
I'm not totally shocked on that front that he is now working with a British brand, even though it makes no sense on paper.
Yeah. Yeah, no. When I saw it, I thought, wait, Burberry? Like, that's Draper, and Draper is working with Burberry. It just makes no sense on a Tommy Paul, who, like you said, should maybe be in a Ralph Lauren or, something like that. But
Yeah.
that is the perfect segue where you're right. If it wasn't for Paige Lauren, like, would they be signing a Tommy Paul? But he does have that sort of tennis background, and it can be sold maybe in that way.
Yeah.
But I think it is kind of an addition to luxury brands sort of adding to their tennis, sort of tennis athlete roster. I think it all started with Gucci and Yannick Sinner, and then Louis Vuitton got Carlos Alcaraz, and now it just Coco Gauff with Miu Miu, and now Tommy Paul with Burberry just keeps building.
Totally, yeah. I think, as you mentioned, Gucci was really one of the first, at least for this cohort of players, and they've worked with Yannick now, I believe, since 2022. I think it's an interesting partnership, but it doesn't necessarily feel like the most organic to me. And I think that's where some of these luxury brands are running into problems, is like you
Yeah.
can't just attach your brand name to an athlete name and hope that like magic happens. Obviously, there will be payoff because Yannick has so many fans. So I'm not saying that it's a dud of a collaboration, but I don't really see Yannick necessarily as that interested in fashion organically. Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that was something he cared about, and so now it just kind of feels like the Gucci label is like slapped all over, his on court bags and stuff, and he's wearing it, but it doesn't feel as genuine as I think maybe a partnership like the Coco Golf with Miu Miu and New Balance feels, because she's young and Miu Miu's so cool and it just like
Yeah.
makes sense. It's kind of hard to put into words why, but I feel like the Yannick and Gucci and even the Carlos and Louis Vuitton just feels like almost more of an afterthought than something that was really thought out and
Yeah.
made a good connection between their personalities and the actual style of the brand.
Yeah, and Coco Gauff has talked a lot about that Miu Miu partnership. I remember talking to her in Cincinnati, and she was so happy and proud of that partnership, and also of how she talked about how she's worn a different kit all season long. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like she loved that sort of thing. So there's that connection with her in fashion, where with Yannick, you probably couldn't tell what kit he wore in
Yeah.
Australia if you asked him. He's like, I don't know, whatever they put in my bag. That's what I wore.
Exactly.
um, so you've also been, I also remember when this came up, and this is also another sort of collaboration between sports and fashion, high fashion. And I wanted to bring this up because this is when sort of, I think, fashion and tennis collide, or athletics collide, and it causes sort of, you know, conflict, if you can say that, because this collection was either you loved it or you hated it. There was no in between. There was
Hmm.
no in between. And this is a collection that I liked. you know Not every, and it's a collection that not everyone can wear well, that I will say, especially the sort of the wrestling, the purple kind of wrestling
Jumper.
outfit. Yeah,
Yeah.
people were calling it like the Borat outfit.
Oh my God.
That's what some people were calling it. But for example, I saw it on Camila Osorio, and she looked phenomenal in it.
Yeah.
I loved the sort of the dress that Jessica Pagula has been wearing with a lot of, again, people call it the poop stain. I'm like, no, if you see it in person, it is so gorgeous. This sort of like ink blotch, like it looks like if you put ink in water
Yeah.
and you get that sort of blotchy print.
Yeah.
I
It's
loved it.
inspired by Japanese ink prints. And I think they said that it was supposed to look like fossilized amber, which I had no idea what
Yeah.
that looked like before, but it tracks with
Mm-hmm.
what I'm seeing. So I agree with you. It was a love or hate it kind of collection. And I did give it a lot of praise. And some people gave me shit for that, including Caitlin Thompson of Racquet Magazine. She told me I was completely wrong. And
Mm.
now that I've seen it on court, I see what she's saying in some ways, but I think there are still some strengths here. I mean, they're
Yeah.
trying. It's interesting. It doesn't look like anything we've seen before. And I celebrate that. It's so
Yeah.
much more than what a lot of traditional kit brands are doing these days. So I overall like it. I love like the silk jacket that both Stefanos and Felix have been wearing on court. I mean, it's just
Mm-hmm.
so cool. So there are things that I like and things that I don't like, but I'm going to give them, an A plus for effort because
Yeah.
we haven't seen a lot of that lately.
Yeah, totally. And that's my thing too about all of this, is because, you get the brands who do nothing but sort of like a plain color, and people are like, they're doing nothing. And then you get the brands that try, and then you're like, they're doing too much. And I'm saying, like, what do
Yeah.
you want?
Yeah. I mean, there's tennis fans, we're never going to be fully satisfied. We're always going to have something
True.
to complain about, especially when it
True.
comes to fashion. So I don't think you can totally win, but it's just good to try.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. This is also something that I wanted to talk about and I love because tennis players are known for their jewelry across the board. The guys wear a lot of bracelets, and the girls have all the necklaces. And I always wonder how they play with them. And, I remember actually seeing this image of Amanda Anisimova with the Tiffany earrings and everything. And I thought, oh, that's a cool collaboration, but she's not wearing that on court. Oh, no, girl, she's wearing those earrings on court. What do
Crazy.
you think about the trend, these sort of jewelry collaborations? Because when we talk about tennis fashion, we tend not to actually go into the jewelry of it all, but they wear a lot. And I'm not even getting into the watches because that's a whole different conversation.
Totally, yeah. I mean, I think it's funny when I first started writing about the jewelry collaborations, I was like, wow, this is a really great idea. Like, how smart. Because as you said, so many of these players are wearing jewelry. And that was only a few months ago. And now I'm already at a point of like, okay, this is getting to be too much because I can name like 6 different jewelry partnerships on the women's side alone
Yeah.
that the space just feels so crowded and none of them feel that special or aligned with the player themselves. Like Amanda Anisimova for Tiffany feels pretty random. The photos are super chic and cool, but I don't see Amanda necessarily as someone who is into like luxury fashion or jewelry. I've never gotten that sense from her, and that's not an insult at all. I just don't
Hmm.
see that. So it doesn't totally make sense. It feels sort of random, like some of the other partnerships I've mentioned. And then like the Madison Keys one is interesting, but as I wrote in hardcore, like who is buying this? I don't know what the like ROI for a lot of these partnerships is because
Yeah.
maybe if this necklace was like $200, which is still a lot of money for a lot of people, I could understand
Yeah.
it because she does have a big fan base and Maddie's really cool. But spending over $1,000 pendant necklace designed by your favorite tennis player. I don't know. I just don't know a lot of people who are actually doing that. So I'm curious to see like how long a lot of these partnerships last because I don't think the ones that are with these like higher value brands necessarily are going to pay off. I think there are partnerships between like Emma Navarro and Missouri and
Majuri.
then
Yeah.
Jessica Pagula and Gorjana, those make a little bit more sense because they have more accessible price points. But these ones, I'm not so sure about.
Right, right. Because I was actually going to say that. I was like, it might be that the ones with like a Majuri seem more accessible because those are in a price range that I can just go down and buy something. Because yes, I'm not getting a pendant for 1350. There's no way.
Totally.
Like, no,
And
no.
one thing I just want to add about this is I actually think it would be interesting to see some jewelry partnerships with the men because when I first thought of jewelry on tennis courts, I immediately thought of like Big Foe and his necklace that he wears.
Yep.
Who makes that necklace? Like, I want to know. Someone should partner
Yeah.
with him on that necklace. That would be a great opportunity. And then I think of like Chapo and Zverev. They're all always touching their necklaces and putting them under their shirt. Don't understand why they play with them. Makes no sense to me. But if they're going to do it, like partner with a
Branded.
brand. Yeah. It
Yeah.
just seems like a missed opportunity.
Yeah. Or even Andre Rublev with his 1,000. I don't know how they play with them.
Yes.
And then also then have the sweatbands. I'm just like, aren't you uncomfortable? But
I
again,
know.
I'm always surprised with how much jewelry tennis players wear, especially expensive jewelry. Like you look at someone like a Dimitrov who's wearing like 14 Van Cleefs under that sweatband. I'm like, wow, okay. I don't know if sweat and Van Cleef goes together, but you
Yeah. I don't
you
get
do
it
you.
either, but I'm a girl who like never wears her wedding or engagement ring because I don't want to like get it dirty.
Yeah.
So I'm the wrong audience, I guess, for this.
Yeah. Oh, okay. This is the reason why I am not mad that we didn't do this episode sooner. because the way my heart stopped when you walked out.
I mean, but let's be real, your heart stops anytime Lorenzo Musetti
Okay,
walks
that's
out
true.
anywhere. He could be wearing
Okay,
like a
that's true.
t-shirt and shorts and yeah, just a beautiful, beautiful human.
He could literally be in his warm up kit, just looking crazy on court, and I would be like, "Oh my god, Lorenzo Musetti!" But I just was like, "Where?" Because I guess I didn't realize he'd only been playing during the day, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I had kind of erased the Wimbledon Bottega leather jacket from my mind because I was so disappointed that it only got one moment in the sun
I know.
that I didn't even realize there was a black possible version.
I know. I know. And I think this one's slightly different style too. It looks like that only has the weave on like the collar and in certain areas of the jacket, whereas the white
Yeah.
one he wore at Wimbledon was like full weave. I think
Full
they're
weave.
both
Yeah.
great, and I agree that the Wimbledon look was a bit traumatic to revisit because it was such a sad loss.
Oh man.
But this is a partnership that I love. It just makes sense to me. Bottega, first of all, is just such a cool brand. They've had such a resurgence in the last like 5 years. Their creative director, Louise Trotter, is a big tennis fan. I've spotted her in Musetti's box. Like she actually
Mm,
cares about the sport. And she's clearly friendly, at least now with Musetti. I don't know how long that relationship has lasted, but it's obviously growing. And he just makes sense. I mean, he's someone that we've seen in so many fashion photo shoots for the last few years, even before the whole fashion tennis connection really blew up. I think for obvious reasons, fashion magazines and photographers are just drawn to him because he
yeah.
is a really attractive human being.
Musetti. Just, those brown eyes, guys. He just,
Yeah.
I don't know. And I just love that they've started like it seems like he has like that sort of like Bottega woven leather charm thing now hanging off of his Asics bag as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is one of the most organic luxury like collaborations. Like it makes sense. And you're
Totally.
completely right. With all the other ones, with like the Gucci, Louis Vuitton, you're like, okay, they found a very like popular player, they slapped a logo on it, and they were like, great.
Yeah.
Musetti and Bottega, it makes sense. You're just like, well, of course. But
Yeah.
he's
And I
probably
think they're
wearing it. It's in his closet already.
I think they're maximizing the partnership. If you look at like
Yeah.
a Louis Vuitton and Carlos Alcaraz, I was shocked to find out that he does not wear Louis Vuitton on court at all. So at least Gucci is having Yannick carry like a Gucci bag. Carlos
Yeah.
doesn't wear Louis Vuitton on court. And I'm like, why would that be? Why
Right.
wouldn't you, even if it doesn't totally make sense, like, why wouldn't you try to make it work and have some really cool Louis Vuitton pieces show up on court?
Yeah.
On the other hand, you see Musetti and Bottega really taking advantage of these like prime time moments when so many eyeballs are going to be on him. And I'm also curious to know how much the Bottega team is working with Asics because I feel like his night kit looked great with this jacket. And I don't think that
Right.
just happens by luck. I think there has to be some communication between the brands, even though they're obviously so different, to make that work well together.
Right. Right. I think the time has come. The
Yes.
time has come. I've been saving this one for later. Venus Williams at the US Open. Like I knew Venus Williams getting a wild card at the US Open meant we were going to get fashion looks. I just did not realize the level of
Yeah.
thought. Like she's always good, but I think it just went to a different level. And I don't think I would have gotten as much detail about each look if it wasn't for you. And it all started with that doubles look. Like when I read the word Kate, I almost passed out. I was like, did you say Kate?
Yeah.
Kate made a tennis dress for Venus Williams? Please explain.
I know. I mean, wish I I wish I knew what Kate Holstein, the designer of Kate, was thinking, but whatever it was brilliant because this is a brand that you don't associate with tennis at all. You don't associate with any sport. Like the women who
Mm-hmm.
wear Khaite, the ones that you envision in your mind, they don't work out, you know, like
Nope.
they're not exercising. I mean, they're glamorous and beautiful, but like they're just not sporty. So
Yeah.
to see a Khaite outfit show up on court on an icon like Venus Williams was just so unexpected and so cool. And it really got people talking. And I loved that it was very classic, but also still felt very current. And I think that's what Khaite does well, and what some of like the best designers that we see that work on custom kits do well. It doesn't have to be this like loud and crazy thing. You can really
Yeah.
achieve a lot with simplicity. And I think that's what this first look did. And credit to her stylist, Ronald Burton, who I think has, you know, been responsible for a lot of these partnerships that we've seen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was definitely a moment. And I think it basically was the sort of, that was, I think, the perfect sort of like amuse-bouche, as they say, for everything else. Because
Yes.
you saw that and you kind of were like, okay, I know what to expect. And it totally delivered, because the first look she wore for her singles match was just, I
So
mean, it was
good.
perfection.
Yeah. It seems, when you take away the furry racquet bag, it seems simple on the surface, but to learn that it was inspired by Althea Gibson is just so cool and shows the kind of thought that's being put into these looks. As I'm sure all of your listeners know, they were celebrating Gibson at this year's US Open. So it was just like the perfect tie-in. It would have been cool regardless, given Venus's own history in the sport. But to make that connection this year of all years was awesome. And then I think to add in that crazy furry racquet bag was just awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
it's going to get everyone talking, and it did, and we're all still talking about it. And I think it will probably be one of the most memorable tennis looks of all time.
Literally of all time. This is like my favorite look of the tournament. Like this look, not just because of what it meant, just there's a whimsy to it because it meant something. And but then she just added this personality to it as well with the racket bag.
Yeah.
It's it just says so much about who Venus Williams is as a person
Yeah.
without saying too much as well. Like,
Totally. And I think
so
it's cool
perfect.
because I think when we saw Venus participating at, I can't remember if it was Cincinnati or some of the American tournaments leading up to the US Open,
Yeah.
she wasn't wearing anything that special. And she has totally earned the right to not do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like she can show up wearing a garbage bag and none of us have a right to say anything. And I think
Yeah.
in some ways that's sort of refreshing too, to see someone who's just achieved so much that they don't have to dress up for us. But at the
Right.
same time, it's cool to see her still recognizing the power of fashion, especially on such a big stage. And I think it was almost unexpected in that way, just because I felt like Venus had reached this point in her career where she was like, I don't really give a shit, you know, like I'm
Yeah.
I'm going to wear what's comfortable for me. And I completely respect that, especially given that she struggled with pain and health issues. Sometimes you just want to be comfortable.
Yeah.
So I think it was just cool and kind of unexpected to see her still really valuing fashion after all these years and recognizing how powerful it can be on court and the stories that it can tell and just like the layers that it can add to the game.
Yeah. And I think what I liked a lot about all of her looks, really, there's one more slide after this, but because there's this red jacket that she wore at her doubles match, the Phillip Lim sort of dress, and then the jacket. It's just the simplicity of everything.
Yeah.
It's a statement, but it's simple as
Yeah.
well.
Totally. It's not, like I said, it's nothing crazy. It's nothing wild other than, you know, the racket bag, but we love
Yeah.
that. But it still stands out and it feels like we're seeing real fashion on a tennis court rather than like a tennis kit that was sort of contorted to be fashionable, if that makes
Yeah.
sense, which I think we see a
Yeah.
lot of with other collaborations. This really feels like it was like fashion first when it came to the
Yeah.
design, but in a way that still makes sense for someone to be wearing when they're playing a sport like professional tennis.
Yeah, totally. And this one as well was another
Loved this
just
one. Yeah,
favorite.
from this like pretty indie New York designer called Who Decides War. It's meant to look like body armor, which I didn't get at first, but I now see. And I just thought it was such a cool kind of inspiration for someone to be wearing on a tennis court, which, you know, tennis as a sport often gets called gladiatorial in terms of
Yeah.
like, I mean, obviously she's playing doubles here, but the 1v1 very much has that vibe to it. And so I thought it was just a really cool like reference to evoke for this sport in particular. And once again, like you said, pretty simple, but with a really interesting backstory.
Yeah. Yeah. Just gorgeous all around. Before I let you go, I wanted to end on a story you wrote for Vogue Business. I encourage everyone to go read it. I'll leave a link in the description of this podcast. But as we talked at the beginning of this episode, that the world of fashion and tennis is getting more and more intertwined. The ATP are making, basically definitive steps to overtly just intertwine it with the sport. And could you just give us sort of like a cliff notes, I guess, of what this article is and what the ATP is doing to sort of mirror what other sports like the NBA and the NFL are doing with fashion?
Yeah, for sure. So I think they're a little late to the party, but I'm glad to see them finally do it. They're essentially launching a fashion marketing program to try to turn their players into sartorial stars, people who are just recognized for their style as much as they
Mm,
are for their game. And I think there are some athletes who are just naturally known for that. But what they're trying to do is really take some of the athletes who are maybe less known for their style, but who have an interest in it, and kind of build their fashion profile and just get them recognized for that a bit more.
yeah.
And so, what that looks like in practice is for the US Open, they set up these styling suites with this famous fashion stylist, Mobolaji Duwadu, who does a lot of cover styling for GQ and styles tons of athletes in general. They set up these suites for 5 of their top athletes, Tiafo, Kaboli, Demon, Rublev, and Runa, and basically dressed them for the week leading up to the Open, for all of the events that they have to go to, the appearances they have to
Ah,
make. They also set up these cool photo shoots, of which I think Rublev's was the best. So I'm glad that you used his photos. And basically just created content for them to use on their own personal social media channels, as well as the ATPs. And I think it's a really brilliant idea. Obviously, we've seen this in a lot of different ways with the NBA, the NFL, even F1 a bit. But I'm glad to see the ATP taking fashion seriously, even if it is a little later than most sports. And when I spoke to their marketing team, they told me that they have much bigger ambitions for this beyond just the
mm,
styling suites. They basically want to create their own version of the tunnel walk. So, as we all know, tennis does have tunnels, but that's kind of a hard tunnel to turn into a tunnel walk when you are, seeing athletes contracted to wear their kit sponsors. They can't necessarily wear the most fashionable look because it has to be something they have to play in.
yeah.
We've seen tastes of it, as we've discussed here, with like the Musetti jacket from Bottega, but I think they want to expand on that and start filming players just arriving to tournament sites, which we've already seen a bit of, but usually the players aren't that dressed up. And so I think there's
No,
going to be
yeah.
a big push to get them kind of arriving to these sites in really stylish and funky outfits and making that just like an opportunity for fans to follow and start paying more attention to. And then the third part that their marketing team is really interested in is just collaborating directly with luxury brands on broader partnerships. So it could be like an ATP times Louis Vuitton partnership, or something where they're sponsoring the tour or they're sponsoring a tournament or they're sponsoring a slam. They're not totally sure yet what that's going to look like, but I think it's really exciting. And I'm very curious to see where it goes next year.
Yeah, yeah. That all sounds great. Like, again, I feel like you're right when you say tennis is a little bit behind on that. I think in general, tennis is behind in a lot of all this stuff with, new media. And it's nice to see they are catching up. Better late than never, I guess. What I did want to ask you though, because I think we've discussed this privately a little bit, but in terms of, this is ATP we're talking about. The WTA, I think people listening to this might have seen the WTA's version of trying to do something like this, but you haven't heard anything yet of them trying to do something as officially as the ATP is doing this. Yeah.
No, I haven't. I've talked to a few people, have not gotten the sense that that's in the cards, but I do think this push from the ATP might light a bit of a fire under the WTA to take fashion more seriously and try to roll out something similar because it would be a huge missed opportunity not to.
Yeah.
I think one struggle that the WTA has had is that in the top 10, there aren't, outside of Coco, there aren't women that you directly associate with fashion right now.
Right.
And I mean, that's a bit true of, I guess, the ATP, although I would say like Musetti and Draper do seem very aligned with fashion. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's where we're seeing a bit of a struggle is like a lot of these women, and this is completely fair, don't care about fashion. And that's fine. But it is such an awesome marketing tool to take advantage of. So I
Yeah.
just feel like they need to try to find a way to weave it in somehow because it really will bring more eyeballs to the sport on the women's side and just garner more attention.
Yeah. I mean, they do have people like, Arena Sabalenka. And I do know when they were doing those photos at first, I think they did them a lot in Indian Wells. The Arena Sabalenka and Coco Gauff photos were always the ones that stood out as like, oh, okay. Like,
Yes,
those are really great. You know, just see, like, look at Andre. He looks so great.
I know. And he's not someone that you necessarily associate with fashion, but look,
Yeah.
now I do, just from
Yeah.
these
And he just
photos.
has, and that's the thing with him, he just has great personal style. So I feel if
Yeah.
they can like, and I wonder if it's even something where, maybe it's not specifically because I've always had this feeling where I don't think it's always just highlighting the top of the game. There are top 100 players. And I think that's the thing about tennis that's great is that there are just so many of them
Yeah.
that take advantage of the fact that you have so many of these players. And maybe it's an Ava Lease. Ava
Hmm.
Lease is such a great stylish player. Yes, she's not in the top 20, but if
Yeah.
you can sell her, take an Alex Ayala, for example. She's not
Yes.
in the top 20, but she is stylish as hell. And if you sell that, that's a market there.
It's
And
interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's interesting that you mentioned Alex because it does seem like fashion brands and magazines are really gravitating towards her.
Yeah.
She's someone who does stand out on the WTA side as getting a lot of that attention. And I wish we would just see more of that
Yeah.
for more of the players because I think you can count more guys on the ATP side who are getting that love than you can on the WTA side. I don't think
Right.
that's fair. I don't think it makes sense. And I would love to see that change because
Yeah.
a lot of the people who are interested in fashion that are also interested in tennis are women. So why wouldn't you capitalize on that with
Right.
something, a program like this for the WTA?
Yeah, totally. Totally. There's so much we could do. We could, there's so much, and we could be talking forever.
I know. Hire us, WTA. We have ideas.
We have a lot of ideas. This has been so great, Jessica. We obviously talked longer than we should have, but There's so
I'm
much to talk
sorry.
about when you mix fashion and tennis. Thank you so much for joining us. Guys, this is only part 1. There's going to be a part 2. I probably at this point will split up the episodes because otherwise it will be a 2-hour episode and we don't want that. So I will split up the episodes. Thank you for watching and listening to part 1. We will be back in part 2 where we're going to talk about the hits and the misses. We're just going to dive into the individual brands and talk about what was good on court and what was not so much. See you in a bit. Bye, guys.
Bye.